everybody, welcome back to Universal Teas. It's the People's Podcast with your girl Toya, and this episode is called Goodness Gracious, right? And if y'all are looking at the title of the episode, I typed the U and the S in gracious capital, right? Because grace is something that all of us need, it's something that all of us require, it's something that a lot of us need to learn how to practice giving ourselves. So when I think about giving grace, right? Naturally for me, and I think for most people, we tend to extend grace to other people more easily than we do ourselves. So y'all know I am a fan of words and their literal definitions, because in this day and age, we throw a lot of terms out and we don't really know what they mean, or we're not using them in the right context. So we hear the term goodness gracious all the time. So I decided that I wanted to know what the word good meant by itself, what the word grace meant by itself, and then how the two relate to one another in that term goodness gracious, right? So when I looked up the definition of the word good, there were two definitions that stood out to me. One, to be desired or approved of. That is something that's good. Or two, having the qualities required for a particular role, okay? So good has two definitions. One being to be desired or approved of, and the other definition of good is having the qualities required for a particular role, right? And then I looked up the definition of the word grace, because we always say, give yourself grace. We giving somebody grace. We're extending grace to somebody. So the definition of grace is simple elegance or refinement of movement, right? So then even in that definition, I'm like, sis, what does it mean to be refined? Because not everybody know what that means. So the definition of the word refined is improvement of something by making small changes. So when we talk about giving people grace, we're giving them the opportunity to make small improvements, to make improvements through small changes. So when we say we're giving somebody grace, it's very easy for us to overlook things because we're allowing people to make small changes. And I think that it's so important for us to learn how to give ourselves grace and recognize that giving ourselves grace means that we're refined. To be refined, you're taking small steps. And we need to acknowledge that. And I think the more that we internalize the actual definition of the word grace, the more easily we can extend it to ourselves. So first I'm going to talk about extending grace to ourselves, and then I'm going to talk about the contrary idea of extending it to other people. So I said that when we talk about grace, right, and keeping in the mindset of small improvements towards something that is desirable or favorable, because that's what the word good means. So we're using the terms goodness, gracious together. So when we talk about that, I recognize that we need grace, or we don't recognize that we actually need grace for ourselves until we're trying to be better. So in my life and in my journey and in my situations that I've dealt with, you don't really hear somebody saying give yourself grace until you feel like you should be doing better, right? Until you feel like there's something that you need to improve, because remember, grace are those small improvements towards a goal. So I think we need to understand that giving ourselves grace doesn't happen until we realize that we need to do better. I feel like once we start to think about giving ourselves grace, it's when we've hit a point where we feel like we need to improve. We need to go up, because where I am isn't working. It's uncomfortable. It's not favorable for who I really want to be on the inside. So that's when you need to learn to extend grace to yourself. Okay? So don't get flustered. So we need to learn when to turn grace on, because it should be a switch within ourselves, right? So you need to know the situations and the particular instances where you need to extend grace to yourself. You need to understand that grace is, what is it when you do something step by step by step? It's not something that happens instantly. It's progressive. Grace happens progressively. So you need to acknowledge that. And when you give yourself grace, understand that you're not having a quick fix. Focus on one thing that you're trying to change at a time. Focus on the small improvements, and then eventually all of those things will come together. Be gentle with yourself. We say that a lot now in this day and age, and when everybody's trying to be more self-improved, when everybody's trying to love themselves a little bit more, when you're extending grace, you have to be gentle. It's not something that's forced. If you think about somebody that's refined, when I think of refinement, I really think of like Bridgerton. I don't know about y'all, but when they say women are so refined, it's like they're very dainty, they're very elegant. That's a part of grace, is being elegant. So you have to be soft and you have to be gentle. It's not a quick fix. That's not the point. And I know we live in a day and age where we feel like we gotta hustle, we gotta grind, you gotta be hardcore, you gotta show grit. But when you're talking about extending grace, that's when you have to take back all of this hard body nature and be elegant, be soft, be gentle with yourself. And I think that is the time where we actually are able to hear and feel and see the things that we need. A lot of times we try to change things about ourselves and we try to fix them without taking the time to sit your ass down and slow down and really reevaluate and self-assess what it is that you're trying to do. We understand that we need grace when we hit rock bottom, but that doesn't mean you go into turbo mode. It means you really sit down and assess what needs to be changed and you make those small improvements as you need to. Okay? And then I also said, when I was writing my notes and thinking about extending grace, I had a question. I said, what is the role that we're preparing to be good in? Because remember, when we talk about grace, and I just read the definition, we're talking about becoming good. And good means that it's a role or a quality that you're trying to be suitable for. And when we talk about grace, we're talking about small improvements towards this goal that we want to meet, or this quality or role that we're trying to obtain. So when we talk about grace, I want you to think about what is it that you're trying to be good at? Why are you extending yourself grace? What is the result that you're trying to reach? And that takes a lot of clarity. That takes a lot of time with yourself to really figure out why you want to do something. What is it, the role that you want? So let's say in a more concrete scenario, I want to be the boss of this company that I've been working for. Okay, so now you need to think about, in giving yourself grace, what are these small steps, these small improvements that I need to make? If you haven't, I just recently read a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about the small steps, the small changes, the 1% of things that you can do in order to propel yourself to the next level. And when we talk about giving ourselves grace, you have to get very clear on what it is that you want so that you can be even more precise in the steps that it's going to take you to get there. Because a lot of times when we're trying to be better, we're trying to compare ourselves to somebody else's better. You know, and that's counterproductive in that person isn't your goal. Maybe what the amount of status they have can be your goal, but that person is not your goal. You're not them, they're not you. And the way that they move, the way that they give themselves grace is not going to be the same as the way that you give yourself grace. So when we're talking about making these small refinements, these small improvements, these small changes, you need to be very clear on why. Why are you taking each step that you're taking? Why are you taking each precaution that you're taking? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Why are you cutting somebody off? Why are you letting somebody in? Extending grace is intentional. It doesn't mean to slow down. And I know maybe it's just me talking about my experiences and the way that I perceive when people tell me to give myself grace. I think that means that I need to stop and slow down. Not necessarily, right? So after reading these definitions, giving yourself grace doesn't mean you stop. It just means you become more intentional. It just means that you become more aware of how you're moving in the world and how you're moving around people and how you're moving in relation to the goal that it is that you're trying to meet. Giving yourself grace doesn't mean that you're weak. Giving yourself grace doesn't mean that you need to stop. Giving yourself grace does not mean that you need to change your goal or the desire that you have or the thing that you're trying to be good for. Because remember, the episode is called Goodness Gracious, and when you're being good, that's being suitable for a particular role. Don't change the vision, just change the way that you get there. Don't change the goal, just change your habits of how you're going to reach the goal. That's what giving yourself grace is. Giving yourself grace is understanding yourself without anybody's opinion, without counting your steps in comparison to somebody else. Giving yourself grace is just being more intentional. If you ask me, if you disagree, let me know. That's fine. But in my opinion, that's what that means. And child, I've been talking this whole time, but I'm gonna drink some water. Hold on. Period. And so when I think about grace, I also thought about, and I was writing show notes, I was thinking about is giving ourselves grace, does it look the same for everyone? And so I was having a conversation with a friend, and I kind of asked her, like, what did I ask? I think I asked her, like, when do we need to give ourselves grace? And she kind of brought up the idea of understanding that it may look different for certain people, right? Depending on how you grew up, giving yourself grace or allowing yourself to be more intentional depended on your environment. In some spaces, giving yourself grace may have meant that you need to isolate yourself. But in some communities, in some situations, in some households, that's not possible. Right? So giving yourself grace sometimes, and we talked about the idea of how easy it is to give other people grace. It's easy for me to be on the outside of somebody else's story and say, give yourself grace. Take a breath. Calm down. You're still great. You're still beautiful. But it's so hard for us to tell ourselves that because you know all your business. You know every single thing about yourself, even the ugly truths that you try to hide, that you've suppressed. So that's why I think it's so difficult for us to give ourselves grace, because I know everything about me, even the things that I haven't told anyone, even the things that I have suppressed and tried to forget, even the things that hurt me on the inside that I try not to show. We need to learn how to give ourselves grace because I'm the only one who knows all of me. And I didn't realize how real that was until I became an adult on my own. And I started to think about some of the things that I've experienced, some of the things that I grew up knowing or seeing or doing. And I didn't realize how much of an effect they had on me. And those are the things that you really need to give yourself grace on. It's very easy to say, oh my God, me and my friend just had the biggest argument. I'm so frustrated. I think this friendship is going to end. Let me give myself grace. That's a little bit easier than thinking about the toxic shit that you've done, than pointing the finger at yourself. That's a little bit easier than thinking about the shit that traumatized you as a kid, the secrets that you've hid from yourself and your family. Those are the things that you really, really, really need to give yourself grace on, because those are the things that are going to trump the more recent things. So now you may be older, you may be an adult, you may be in a mind space where you are more intentional. We can give ourselves grace. Oh my God, I want to get this assignment done. Oh my God, I want to get this new position at work. It's easy for you to take the steps that you need. I'm not talking about surface level shit. I'm talking about giving yourself grace for the little girl, the little boy inside of you that is afraid to show. You have to give yourself grace in the areas that you forgot about. And in order to give yourself grace, like I said before, you got to get really clear on what it is that you're trying to do. Who is the little girl that I'm trying to heal? And why does she need to be healed? What did she experience? And I just recently, I'm thinking about this because I just recently got a new therapist, right? And when I was going to therapy prior, I had a therapist before this. I was not always very open with her. There are things that I didn't share because I was maybe ashamed. I was embarrassed. I felt like I would be judged. And this is because this is my first time in therapy, but I'm learning that the more that you express the ugliest parts of you, and I'm not saying, listen to me carefully, I'm not saying that you put the ugliest parts of you on blast. I'm saying the more that you express them, the more that you let it out, whether it be through therapy, through journaling, however you express it, you need to let that shit out. And then you can give yourself grace. Once you lay out all of your own bullshit, and I'm not saying on social media, I'm not saying go on live talking about how your baby daddy ain't shit. I'm not talking about going on live telling all your business, all your trauma, busting somebody at the house, getting cheated on. That's not what I'm talking about. But I mean laying it all out for you. Because if you lay all of your shit out, you can clearly see where it is you need to do work. And that's going to hurt. That's going to be triggering. But you got to understand that if you are able to pull out your own triggers, nobody else can put them against you. If you're able to name where it is that you are lacking, where you are struggling, where you are suffering, then you can give yourself grace. You can't give yourself grace for something that you haven't acknowledged is even present within you. And I really hate, and I feel like I say this damn near every week, we live in a generation where we've confused acknowledging our shit or owning our shit or expressing our bullshit or expressing the things that hurt us, expressing our trauma, expressing our brokenness with displaying it on social media. Pretend that this shit don't exist. Lay that shit out. I don't care if you have to write all of the things that you don't like about yourself, all of the things that you are ashamed of. post them up on the mirror and address each one day by day. I don't care how you do it, but until you conquer the enemy within yourself, you can't deal with anyone. You can't keep giving people grace when you don't know how to do it for yourself. So giving yourself grace is being honest, but being, like I said, the definition of grace is simple elegance or refinement. Do it gently. Just because that shit hurts you doesn't mean you have to continually hurt yourself as you acknowledge it. Give the ugly parts of you a hug. Tell the ugly parts of you what up. Thank you for what you taught me, but you gotta go. You can't dismiss something about yourself that you've never allowed entry into you. It happened. They did it. You did it. You know what I mean? You can't just keep suppressing things and then say, well, I'm going to give myself grace and just chill. Chilling is not giving yourself grace. Grace is actually work, but it's elegant. It's gentle. It's okay to be gentle in your bullshit, because how you give something to someone you can't give to yourself. Simply put, how can you give someone something you haven't given yourself? Because that means you're extending grace to people blindly. If you're saying, oh, give yourself grace, I'm going to give you some grace, you're doing it blindly. I'm about to piss some people off. Even more concrete, right? I feel like I'm all up here. I'm going to bring it down. When we talk about work, right? We have a idea, or in a lot of work settings, I don't know about, not mine, but maybe y'all work settings, they give you a 5-minute grace period to be late. Don't we get a 5-minute grace period? No, because at the allotted time that you're supposed to be here, you got work to do. Giving yourself grace is not something that has to be hard, but it's damn near a boundary. Why am I giving you grace? You know what time you got to work. You knew what time you got to work when you signed the contract. Okay? Stop giving people grace. My scholars, Miss Fran, I didn't do this assignment because I don't care. I'm not giving you grace, because when you leave outside of these doors, the world is not giving you grace. Give yourself grace and just come to me and tell me that you messed up. Okay, you're going to take an L. Don't let it happen again. We have to stop associating grace with, what am I trying to say? We have to stop associating grace with the idea that we can fuck up. Intentionally, right? So don't intentionally say, oh, I'm going to be late to work because I get a 5-minute grace period. That's bullshit. Now, if you do show up late, if you do misstep, if you do forget to call somebody back, cool. You can, acknowledgement is a part of giving yourself grace. And I think that's the point that I'm really trying to make. When you give yourself grace, it's not intentionally fucking up. It's acknowledging where the fuck ups happen, where the pain lies, where the things that you struggle with reside, and then making the necessary steps to improve them. That's grace. So a part of grace is acknowledgement. Without acknowledgement, grace is just you trying to finesse the system. And the system can be yourself. You can't be fake healed and say, oh, no, I'm just giving myself grace. I'm gonna take a week off. No, that ain't how we gonna do that. Okay? Hold on. What's this? Who on here? I think they're showing me who on here. Hey, y'all. But yeah, so when we talk about grace, I also said that remember to pause and give yourself grace whenever you need necessary. So it's okay when giving yourself grace that you pause, but don't quit. Don't stop. Don't feel like you need to, child, I don't know what got me burping like this. What did I eat today? Oh, I don't remember. Anyway, but it's okay. You need to realize that once you establish how to give yourself grace, I said that you need to use it like one of those little emergency disaster plans. Y'all know, like back in the day, they used to have the commercials where you need the little emergency kit with like a flashlight, batteries, Band-Aids, all that stuff that you put in like an emergency kit. Use grace as your emergency kit. Grace needs to be a plan that you've devised for yourself. It needs to be an individualized plan for your own improvement. So when you get in these situations where you feel like your back is against a wall and you're saying, I need to give myself grace. Now, keep in mind the term goodness gracious. You're trying to be good. So this is the role that I'm trying to meet. So I need to give myself grace, and this is how. So what I want y'all to do, and it's going to be y'all heart work, because I ain't did this in a while. You ain't got heart work in a minute. I want you to figure out what your grace disaster plan is going to be. Is that what I should call it? Your emergency grace plan. That's what it is. So you need to decide what your emergency grace plan looks like. So let's say, and I'm just going off the top of the dome, let's say that your emergency grace plan, you're saying, hey, I need to pause and I need to literally make a visual representation of what it is that I'm feeling, what the trigger is, what it makes me feel, and then you can devise a plan on where it is that you're trying to be. And then figure out the steps that you need to take to get there. Do I need to take me a mental health day from work when I'm feeling overwhelmed? And in that mental health day, what am I doing? What does grace look like for you? Because we keep saying it, and I think we associate grace with being lazy, but we need to not do that. When we talk about grace, it needs to be a very intentional plan and the idea that you have for how you're going to reach the good. And the good is the particular role that you are trying to step into. So when we talk about grace, y'all, don't get lazy in grace. Be intentional. Okay? I think of grace as kind of a form of self-care. Can we call grace a form of self-care? Yeah, what y'all think? I feel like we can call grace a form of self-care, but it needs to be intentional, right? It needs to be intentional. Giving yourself grace and taking a break are two very different things, and I think we need to be able to acknowledge that. So write it out. Write out active steps of what it looks like when you need to give yourself grace. Go to I said great. Well, when you need to be great too, you can write out what that look like, but we ain't talking about that right now. Right now we're talking about giving yourself grace. When you need to give yourself grace, you need to figure out what it is that you are doing. How are you addressing it? Start with the simple things, right? And I think when we give ourselves grace, there's some ugly shit in your past that you haven't acknowledged, that you just kind of held down for a while because nobody's brought it up, nobody's asked you about it. That's cool. You can pretend like it ain't there for a little minute. But until you're ready to get to that, start with the top. Start with the easier things. Devise a plan for those, right? Then go down a little bit. Go a little deeper until you get to the root of what it is that you need to extend grace on, because I promise you, if you get very refined, and remember that refinement is an improvement of something by small changes. When you get very refined at the roots, can't nobody shake you. When you made the small improvements in the soil that you're going to be planting in, your branches and your trees and your leaves, just like a tree, are going to be so strong, so fruitful, because at the root, it is good. You can't just expect to go and water the leaves of a plant, right? I'm not a plant mom, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I know my mom had a lot of plants growing up, and you can't just water the leaves and expect the plant to grow. You got to water the soil. You sometimes got to take those plants out of the pot that they're in and move them to a new pot, but you're doing the work in the dirt. Same thing with extending yourself grace. If you want to start with watering the leaves of yourself, that's fine, but don't forget about the fact that you got to get deep in the dirt and who you are and extend grace there. Extend grace to what hurts. Extend grace to what is uncomfortable, because it's so easy for you to look at somebody and not even know what their roots look like, because maybe that person don't need grace. Maybe they need Jesus. And you telling them, I'm going to give you some grace. No, I ain't giving you no grace because I don't know what your roots look like. You need to be the one to give yourself grace. And I think for me, I got so, and this is when I talked about addicted to pain. I got so addicted to feeling like people had my back, or like I got addicted to the sympathy from my situation. And so it was so easy for me to be like, they said that they're going to give me grace. Or they said I should give myself grace, so I'm okay. And it's like they don't know shit about your roots. You need to be able to give yourself grace at the roots. They're just talking about the shiny parts of you that they see right now. They're just talking about the chapter of you that they stepped in on. But you know that you can't fully accept the next level of who you're going to be. You can't even see the next level of who you're going to be if you haven't done the work at the roots. Make it make sense. I don't know. Right? Grace is a form of self-care. I'm about to write my emergency grace plan. And then the last note that I had, y'all, this is going to be quick. It says, grace to others can come in the form of compliments. When people compliment you, believe it. So, this is kind of shifting gears a little bit. A lot of times when people tell us to give ourselves grace, it's kind of like in the form of a compliment. Like, oh my God, you need to give yourself grace. You're so beautiful. You're so smart. You got your own apartment. You got your own car. But it's like, that's the leaves. The grace that I really need, sis, is at the roots, because I'm toxic to myself. The grace that I need is at the roots because I self-sabotage because I was in some bullshit before, and now when something good is in front of me, I don't know what to do with it. I need grace at the roots because I have childhood trauma. Trigger warning. I need grace at the roots because somebody touched me in an inappropriate way. I need grace at the roots because I can't fully comprehend how to navigate in this world because my mom did this or my dad did this or we was broke as fuck or things like this happened to me. Yeah, it's easy for people to say, give yourself grace. It's easy for people to say that, but you can't fully accept it. So I think we need to disassociate grace and compliments because a lot of times when we when somebody, child, get it together, Toya, when somebody tells us to give ourselves grace, that's followed up or started with a compliment like, oh my God, you're so smart. Give yourself some grace. And that sounds good, but you can't really accept that because you know the grace that you need isn't because I know I'm cute. I know I'm smart. I pay all my bills by myself. I know I got that, but that's not my real issue. That's what you see. But my real issue is I don't know how to manage money. My real issue is I get attached to people easily. My real issue is I am toxic to myself because I invite things that are not serving my greater purpose. My real issue is I'm insecure. That's some of y'all. My real issue is that I get jealous of other people. My real issue is that I don't feel like I'm as good as these compliments you're giving me. That's why I can take these compliments, but you don't really believe them because you're a people pleaser. So giving yourself grace is something that we need to understand that we have to do for ourselves. And when it comes to the real world, I'm not really a fan of giving people grace. Especially when, and I don't know if, and I feel like I don't know, people say this could be trauma, but I don't think so. I hate being late. When it comes to being on time, like, I don't really give grace. You can ask my very best friends. They talk about it all the time. Like, yo, if you tell me a time, that's a time. Like, if you know that you can't make a time, tell me a time an hour later. So I don't be showing up looking crazy. That's not an opportunity to give yourself grace. That's just being lazy and inconsiderate. If you ask me, it happens sometimes. But again, we need to understand that when we're talking about grace, we need to be more intentional, one, with the word, and two, with the actions that come along with it. Giving grace is your responsibility. Nobody has to give you grace for anything. You have to be able to give yourself grace on your own terms. Because once you've extended grace to yourself, other people's opinions and thoughts don't really matter because you know you're doing the work. Right? Right or wrong or right. Okay? So I'm going to just do a quick recap. And if you are here, make sure you share the video. So yeah, this episode was called Goodness Gracious, and we use that term a lot, so I broke down what good and grace means. So when we talk about something being good, the definition of good is having qualities required to meet a specific role. So when we mention the role, we're talking about what it is that you want to be, what it is that you want to do, and I'm not talking about a job or a profession. I'm not talking about a title in life like a wife or a mom. I'm talking about being free, being independent, being clear-minded. What is the role that you're trying to assess? That is good. Okay, that is what good means. And then we talk about the word grace, which is simple elegance or refinement of movement. And to be refined means that you're making small changes towards something. So you're making small changes towards this good role that you're trying to achieve, this good quality, this good how I'm using the definition in the word. But y'all know I'm talking about small improvements to get to where you're trying to go. That's what we talk about when we talk about giving grace. Now, we went a little deep past the surface level. When we're talking about giving ourselves grace, you need to give yourself grace on a deeper level for the ugliest parts of you. Find out the shit that you're most uncomfortable with, the things that you're most embarrassed of, the things that you most misunderstand. Is that a word, child? Child, that you don't understand about yourself. Get to those things. Devise a plan on how you're going to get to good. Because you got the grace, now you need the good. What are you trying to be gracious to get good at? For? Something like that. That's one of the most crucial opportunities to provide grace when it's something you may not really understand or tolerate. Like being late. Okay. Wait, let me read that again, child. That's one of the most crucial opportunities to provide grace when it's something you may not really understand or tolerate, like being late. I guess so. I mean, I guess that's true. Dude said that because she always late. But I ain't gonna bust you out. But what I was saying was we have to understand that giving ourselves grace happens most genuinely and most effectively, rather, when we give grace for the ugliest parts of ourselves, for the things that we don't really understand, the things that we don't really know. Oh, I guess that's what you just said. I said the things you don't understand. So that makes sense. Giving yourself grace for the things that you don't really understand and appreciate about yourself yet, you have to give yourself grace in those areas before you can step into the world. I said that for some reason, a lot of us are more quick to give others grace than we are to give ourselves grace. And we need to figure out why that is. Once we figured out why that is, you need to understand that giving yourself grace has to be like an emergency disaster kit. We called it our emergency grace plan. You need to be able to, once you figure out what giving yourself grace looks like strategically, or y'all, I ain't got words. I keep saying not strategically, but like planned out. Once you figure out what grace looks like, you need to be able to return to that as often as you need to. Because new situations are going to arise where you will need to give yourself grace past the roots to maintain who you are, to maintain the work that you've done prior to. You need to be able to extend grace to yourself at any given moment and know what that looks like. Because giving grace are those small improvements. What small things do I need to keep in my emergency grace kit so that I can pull them out at any time when I'm feeling the need to? Yes. All right, bet. I think that's all I got. Grace is not the same for everyone. A lot of it depends on your life situations, how you grew up, what you grew up seeing, what you grew up experiencing. So giving ourselves grace may be a little more difficult for people with with more traumatic stories and lives and situations. It's going to be a lot more work for you. I'm sorry. But I promise the outcome is going to be greater for you as well. So goodness gracious, child. Y'all do the work. I'm going to do the work. We going to do the work. And that's all I got for y'all. Give yourself grace. Be intentional. Giving yourself grace does not mean giving up. It means taking your time, slowing down, and getting intentional with what it is that you're trying to do. Giving yourself grace doesn't mean that you change the goal. Giving yourself grace does not mean that you switch up what it is that you want to be or you want to do. It just means switching up how you approach it. One of the hardest times, don't try to switch it up now. One of the hardest times to provide grace is when it's something you may not understand or tolerate. That's what I meant. That's what you just said. Anyways, I ain't giving people grace for a lot of things. Oh my God. Okay, so this just came up in my head. Stop giving people grace who got you fucked up. Because there's a fine line between giving grace and being a goofy. Let's be very clear. I done been a goofy. I don't know if you've been a goofy, but I just realized, and it just hit me, the spirit of the Lord of the gracious gods just came over me. There's a fine line between giving grace and being a goofy. Okay? Take it from one goofy. I'm trying to get out the circus. Take it from one clown. Don't become a part of the circus, baby. There's a large difference between giving grace and being a goofy. Understand that comes with boundaries. What is it in you that's allowing you to be the goofy that's giving grace? Ask yourself that. Get clear on what it is, because if you're giving yourself grace, there's something that you want. Is that thing obtainable to you? Is that situation even something that you need to be good? Because remember, we're talking about goodness gracious. Is that a role that you actually want? Well, you may want it. Is that a role that you actually see suitable for yourself? Or are you just giving grace because you've already extended enough time? You've been doing work on some shit you ain't even really know what you was trying to do. So you really think you're giving grace, but in all actuality, you's being a goofy. Takes one to know one. So yes, I'm talking to you. Talking about some, come out the circus, friend. I'm getting out. I'm out. Out the circus, child. I don't want no parts. That's a whole episode in itself. I just pissed myself off. Child, stop playing. Stop giving grace to people that got you fucked up. Because they don't deserve grace. They might deserve these hands. Okay? Anyway, y'all know who I'm talking to. Yup, you. Stop giving that job grace when you know it's not where you need to be. Stop playing with yourself. You don't need to give yourself grace in some situations. You need to get gone. Figure that out. I don't know how you can tell yet. Y'all tell me. Shit. Because people got you fucked up. That's going to be another episode. Yes, they got you fucked up. But yeah. That's all I got for y'all. Give yourself grace and keep going. And you the shit. Even if you don't believe it yet, you got to believe that you will be the shit. Because sometimes we ain't the shit. Like sometimes, I'm not the shit right now. Somebody else the shit. But, take your time. Don't let these people stress you out. Yeah, so I'm going to close this out. Thank y'all for joining me right here on Universal Teas. It's the People's Podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. Make sure you also visit my website. It is universalteas.canva.site. Well, wherever you're listening to this at, I'll put a link to the website there. I am also going to be looking for some guests on my podcast. I got some dope shit coming up that I would love for y'all to be a part of. So on talking about I'm ready to tell my story. On my website, I have a link if you would like to be a guest and come and chop it up with me and give me some advice. So fill out that form and I will get back to you ASAP. A lot of y'all don't got no choice but to be on my podcast. So if I text you, I'm not giving you grace because you're going to tell me yes because I don't got time for child. Y'all coming. But yeah, it's about to get great over here. And I'm just very clear on the vision and the why. And I feel really compelled to just be and exist fully right now in this endeavor. And I want y'all to do it with me. Because if you want to go far, hold on, let me not fuck it up. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I'm trying to go real far. So I need y'all to come with me. And that's just that on that. I'll see y'all next time. Bye.